You were never meant to hear this, not like this. Somewhere in the dust of forgotten crypts, where monastic vows met unspoken horror, lies a secret that fractures every belief you hold. Picture the morning mist creeping over ancient stone, no bells, no chants, just the cold whisper of devotion tipped into madness. The monks who buried themselves alive. St. Luke's forgotten order. They sealed their own tombs, day after day, believing salvation lived underground. But what if I told you they weren't seeking God? What if their true purpose was far darker? Designed by powers who understood that control isn't forced, it's inherited, woven into your psyche from birth. You'll feel unsettled. Good! Because when the veil lifts, comfort becomes poison. What I'm about to reveal shatters the illusion that faith is pure. These men, once scholars, healers, guardians of parchment and prayer, were manipulated. By who? By the hidden architects of every major institution who understood a terrifying truth: once you own a man's fear, you don't need to own his will. In the next moments, you'll descend. A journey through catacombs of the soul. You'll learn how silence can imprison more than chains, how devotion becomes weaponized, how a vow becomes compliance. Men locked themselves alive to break their own minds, so someone else could build a better jail. These revelations won't be easy, but you crave them. You're not here for fairy tales. You want the unraveling, the forbidden. You want to see behind the curtain and never look away. The candle guttering against shadow is your invitation. Lean in, listen, because once you hear these truths, archived in secret manuscripts, whispered in crypts beneath cathedrals, your mind will never settle. The world you know dissolves. And what remains, well, that remains only for those willing to embrace the darkness within. Welcome, or perhaps, warning, you're entering St. Luke's realm. Pause. Candle flares. The first piece of the mosaic starts now beneath the earth, where they called it salvation, and where the architects of control smiled in silence. The screen fades into an ancient monastery perched atop a jagged cliff, wind howling like lost voices. The camera descends into the earth, into the stone. They called themselves custodes lucis, guardians of the light. But they lived in darkness? Literally. Beneath the monastery of St. Luke, deep in the Carpathian Mountains, lay a labyrinth of cells. No windows, no doors, just bricked-in rooms, each barely large enough to kneel. That's where they stayed. Until death, buried alive by their brothers in ceremony. This wasn't martyrdom, it was obedience, ritualized, systematic. These monks believed true enlightenment came through total abandonment of the flesh. Not by resisting death, but by choosing it slowly. Willfully. A few inches of mortar at a time. But behind the veil of sacred silence, something else was happening. Something much older than Christianity, much darker than religion. Archaeological records found in 1978, under the collapsed altar of the ruined chapel, describe something chilling. Each burial chamber was inscribed, not with scripture, but with geometric sigils. Symbols predating Christianity by millennia. Patterns known to influence cognition, sleep cycles, even the dream state. We're talking ancient neurotech carved in stone. And the monks? Their final writings weren't prayers. They were visions, fragments, dream maps, descriptions of serpents made of light, and voices behind the veil of language. They were trying to reach something. Not heaven, not God, but another intelligence. You're beginning to feel it now, aren't you? That itch behind your thoughts. That soft pull beneath the skin of reality. You're remembering something your ancestors were told to forget. The monks weren't worshipping. They were communicating. And their death? By sealing. It wasn't sacrifice. It was a signal. St. Luke's order was disbanded in the 14th century after a papal investigation. Publicly, the report cited blasphemous practices. Privately, it warned of ritual systems incompatible with human sanity. The Vatican sealed the site, burned the texts. But a few fragments survived, passed hand to hand through secret libraries. Always protected, always feared. Now you're one of the few to hear it? You feel the descent now, don't you? This isn't just history, it's programming. The same forces that taught men to seal themselves alive are still shaping your thoughts, your choices. You've just traded one monastery for another. But you're waking up. Fade to black. The mortar hasn't dried yet. We can still tear it down. Darkness pulses in silence. A low hum begins, as if something ancient has stirred just beneath audible range. Images flash. Skeletal hands bricked into walls, pages turning, eyes watching through cracks in stone. There was a hand behind the mortar. Always. The custodes lucis believed they were choosing death, but choice was the illusion. Behind their sacred texts, behind the chants and rituals, sat a figure veiled in shadows, the Manus Domini. The hand of the Lord, they called it. But it wasn't divine. This hand was not a man. Not entirely. Records passed through the Vatican's forbidden codices describe a figure who never ate, never slept, never aged. He moved only at night, no one saw his face. Some said he was the last of an ancient bloodline, others said he was something else entirely, a remnant of the pre-human priests. The kind that whisper through myths, that bend history without ever being named. Every cell, every chant, every burial, orchestrated, not for salvation, but for contact. The monks were unwitting instruments in a larger design, the creation of a psychic conduit. Think of it, dozens of minds, each isolated in absolute darkness, stripped of food, sound, time, reduced to raw consciousness. That's not devotion. That's a neural network. Burial wasn't the end. It was the activation. Deep in the monastery archives, ones only recently unearthed after decades of deliberate silence, we found diagrams. Cross-sections of the underground cells, not as graves, but as circuits. The layout matches ancient energetic grids found in Babylon, Göbekli Tepe, and something else. The shape mirrors the layout of the pineal gland, the seat of consciousness, the eye of God. You understand now? These men weren't saints. They were nodes, living transmitters, until they died. Then they became receivers. And what came through those walls was never meant for the human mind. St. Luke's monastery wasn't just a place of prayer. It was a device, a living cathedral built to channel ancient frequency, one that bypassed language, culture, even belief, one that spoke directly to the subconscious. This is the power you were never taught. That belief is architecture. That ritual can shape reality, and that you even now are living inside systems built not to free you, but to use you. The hum deepens. You're not the listener. You are the signal. And now something is listening back. The screen opens to a candlelit manuscript, its ink faded but pulsing with intent. A cold wind slips through unseen cracks as if the monastery itself still breathes. Then the sound of a heartbeat slowed. Heavy, unearthly. There was one rule in the order of St. Luke that stood above all others: never speak after the sealing. Not even in thought. Silence was sacred, but not for the reasons we were told. It wasn't about reverence. It was about containment. Because once the walls were closed, the voices began. They called it the turning silence. A rite known only to the inner circle. Once a monk had reached his final cell, a ritual would begin, silent, symbolic, horrifying. It involved a series of carved gestures performed in absolute dark, traced against the wall with blood drawn from the tongue. They said it opened the veil, but the truth? It opened the mind. The first signs came quickly. Disembodied whispers, patterns of thought no man could summon alone. Then visions, then something worse, alignment. The monk's dreams would sync, across different cells, across different minds. A lattice of shared experience began to form, like a single mind stretched across dozens of dying bodies. But there was one who broke the chain. His name was Brother Adrasto. He was among the most devout, until the night he performed the rite and saw something watching back. Not God. Not angels. But something with no face, cloaked in flickering black, whose presence warped time itself. Adrasto emerged from his cell 2 days later, bleeding, eyes rolled back, whispering symbols not spoken in any human tongue. He tried to warn the others. No one listened. They called it madness. But the order's records say that 3 monks in adjacent cells died screaming that night, despite their mouths being sewn shut. Adrasto disappeared the next day. Not fled. Vanished. His cell was bricked closed behind him. But inside no body. Just an imprint scorched into the stone wall, like something had peeled him from existence. Whatever force the monks reached out to, it didn't just listen. It reached back. Adrasto proved it could take. That's why silence wasn't reverence, it was defense. A desperate firewall between the human mind and an intelligence that cannot be understood, only endured. The screen flickers. A whisper is heard not in sound, but in thought. You still think this is history. It isn't. It's prophecy written backward, dark, close, suffocating. The screen flickers like failing torchlight, revealing only fractured glimpses. Walls carved in maddening spirals, rusted chains without prisoners, and in the center, a sealed stone door. No handle, no inscription, just a symbol pulsing. They called it the sigil vault. Hidden beneath the lowest catacomb, past even the ossuary where the dead stacked like forgotten scripture. Only 4 monks were ever allowed to enter it. Not priests, not abbots, operators. Men chosen not for faith but for mental resistance, because what lay within was not meant to be seen. Each wall was etched top to bottom in symbols, burned in with tools made of bone and iron, not ink, sigils, glyphs, archetypal forms. The kind that bypass the conscious mind and rewrite instinct itself. These weren't just drawings. They were triggers. Psychic command codes written in sacred geometry and forbidden linguistics. You don't understand. Let me put it plainly. These symbols don't just mean something. They do something. Exposure was brief. 15 seconds. Any longer and the mind would begin to unravel. Monks described seeing visions of infinite corridors of themselves aging and dying 1,000 times. Some tore their eyes out. Others smiled and walked into the crypts, never to speak again. Here's what they don't want you to know: these symbols weren't created by the order. They were discovered, reproduced from carvings on a megalith buried under the monastery, far older than the structure itself. Carbon dated to 10,800 BCE. That's pre-agriculture, pre-language, pre-everything. But here's where it gets worse. The same symbols have appeared elsewhere. Deep inside the Great Pyramid. Behind false walls never meant to be opened. Beneath the Vatican Library in documents never meant to be copied. And in the subconscious sketches of CIA remote viewers from Project Stargate. These sigils transcend culture, language, even time. They don't belong to us. They were implanted, left behind. Like warning labels on a weapon we still don't understand. The Vatican ordered the vault sealed after the fourth seer went mad and wrote a 900-page treatise in a language linguists still can't identify. It was titled simply Infractum, Latin for the unbroken. Not a prophecy, a statement. Because whatever these symbols were designed to contain, never left. It never left. The pulse of the sigil slows like something is watching you now. The screen trembles slightly as if the footage itself is unstable. Static crackles in and out. A low spiral of stone unfolds on the screen, winding downward, carved into the bedrock. Voices overlap, whispering in layered echoes. Collapse, collapse. They never taught you this in Sunday school. The rite of the spiral collapse wasn't a sacrament. It was a system override, a psychological disassembly engineered to fracture the human ego, piece by piece, until only the void remained. The monks believed the soul had to be hollowed before it could be filled, but the question was, filled by what? The spiral itself was physical, a descending corridor carved beneath the monastery. Monks would walk it blindfolded, barefoot, in total silence, for hours, sometimes days. Each turn deeper warped their perception of time, self, and space. They were monitored not for progress, but for breakdown. By the seventh loop, hallucinations began. Not just visions, but shared imagery across multiple monks. Faces of dead saints weeping black tears, labyrinths of flesh. A choir of inverted voices singing in reverse Latin. These weren't delusions. They were insertions, designed experiences. The deeper secret, the spiral, was a trigger path. The curve itself mirrored the golden ratio, phi, found in everything from DNA to galaxies, but inverted, reversed, twisted against nature. That geometry activates the same regions of the brain as trauma, religious ecstasy, and deep trance. In that state, suggestion becomes scripture. Programming becomes prophecy. Be the final loop, the initiate would reach what they called the chamber of final naming. There, in total darkness, he would hear his name spoken back to him, but not by a man. Something else. Something older. They described it as hearing the voice of their original architect. Not God. Not self. Something between. And when they emerged, if they emerged, they were no longer entirely themselves. Some walked in perfect stillness for days. Some could repeat entire books backwards. Some didn't speak ever again. But their presence changed the minds of those around them. A contagious resonance. A frequency. Let me say this plainly now. What the Order discovered is what secret institutions, shadow states, and hidden elites have known for centuries: that belief is a vector. The mind is a key, and identity is just a layer to be peeled. The rite was never abolished, it was refined. Now it lives in algorithms, architecture, even media. The spiral never ended, it just went digital. The screen cuts to satellite imagery, cities viewed from above, their roads coiling like veins. A drone shot spins downward into a spiral-shaped plaza. A soldier blinking rapidly in a sterile room, electrodes on his temples. A soft voice says, "Begin sequence Delta." You think the spiral collapse was buried with the monks. No, it was extracted, weaponized, rebranded. When the Vatican sealed St. Luke's monastery, they didn't destroy the rites, they filed them. And within a decade, the intelligence community came knocking. 1952. A classified program under NATO's Psychological Research Wing begins testing a cognitive reduction chambers. Recreations of the spiral, now encoded with strobe lights, white noise, and electromagnetic pulses. By the 70s, it had evolved into full-scale trials under Operation Hihama, the goal, not to kill the self, but to rewrite it. They called it controlled collapse conditioning, and the blueprint was St. Luke's. Victims, soldiers, agents, sometimes civilians, were exposed to prolonged sensory collapse protocols. Darkness, repetition, isolation, sigil-based stimuli fed through subliminal loops. They weren't interrogated, they were re-authored. Taught to abandon identity and receive insertion commands, personality overlays, synthetic beliefs, mission memories. Let me be clear, they weren't brainwashed, that's crude. They were rebuilt. Like software. And once a man is rebuilt, he can't tell the difference between what he chose and what he was given. That's the final evolution of control, when resistance becomes impossible, because the desire to resist never arises. You're probably wondering what this has to do with you. Everything. The spiral collapse isn't a dungeon anymore. It's a feed, a scroll, a loop. You move through it every day. Images, headlines, outrage, dopamine numbness. Round and round. Your mind is being shaped by repetition, isolation, symbolism, just like theirs. But instead of monks, it's marketers. Instead of a cloister, it's your screen. Ask yourself, when was the last time a thought felt entirely yours? You've already been inside the spiral, and if you've watched this far, you feel it too. That shiver at the edge of recognition. That unease that maybe, just maybe, you've been prepared. The screen pulses once, words appear faintly behind the spiral. Not all prisoners wear chains. The screen goes black. Then, white chalk lines scraped across stone. A pyramid drawn in blood, upside down. Whispered Latin, layered over the sound of wind through a crypt. The voice returns heavier now, more certain. Every structure hides another within it. Every church casts a deeper shadow. And beneath St. Luke's order, there was another order, unnamed, unseen, but absolute. They called it Ecclesia Obscura, the hidden church. It had no chapel, no hymns, no saints, just structure. 7 tiers, 7 minds. Each tier knowing only the one above and below, like a human pyramid with eyes facing upward, never down. At the top wasn't God. It was a principle, one that doesn't love, doesn't judge, doesn't forgive. It selects. The monks believed they served the divine. They didn't. They served hierarchy, cold, perfect, unbreakable, built not to uplift, but to contain. Because once the order discovered how to collapse the mind, something had to be built to control what filled the void. The first tier were the recorders. Not monks, not men of faith, but observers, trained to watch without interpretation. They etched events as they happened, coldly, objectively. Even if it meant watching their brothers starve in their cells. The second were the architects. They designed the rituals, the symbols, the chambers. But they weren't allowed to speak to the initiates. Why? Because meaning corrupts precision. Emotion pollutes structure. The third tier, translators. They decoded the visions from collapsed minds and restructured them into strategic sequences. Scripts, instructions, algorithms. What began as religious ecstasy became tactical data. Be the fourth tier, we reach the breachers. These were not human in the way you understand it. All male. All genetically screened. Many believed they were bloodlines preserved from ancient priests, kings of Mesopotamia. Their role was to interact with whatever answered from the dark. The fifth, silencers. You don't hear about them because they succeeded. Their job was to erase memories, red lines. Entire villages vanished after certain rites went too far. They weren't punished. They were promoted. The sixth, the crownless. Visible power without visible identity. They advised kings, sat beside popes. Never recorded, never named. But trace every war of faith, and you'll find their fingerprints. And the seventh tier. That is still debated. Some say it was a singular entity. Others say it was an intelligence outside of human comprehension. Not spirit, not machine. Something that required 7 layers of obedience just to be near it without losing sanity. Ecclesia Obscura didn't die with the monastery. It evolved, fragmented, infiltrated. Today it moves beneath governments, media, tech, even education. It doesn't need to be seen. It only needs you to obey without knowing why. The pyramid inverts slowly, then collapses into static. The screen shows a slow montage, a child in a fluorescent classroom staring blankly. A church congregation chanting in unison. A therapist nodding silently as a patient sobs. Then a cut to static, flickering images of ancient symbols overlaid with modern logos. Something connects. You feel it. They didn't bury the rituals. They branded them. Everything you've learned to call normal, your education, your rituals, your confessions, these are not random. They are diluted echoes of St. Luke's rites, distributed like a sacrament to the masses. This was never about ending the order. It was about scaling it. Look closely. The modern school system divides time into rigid bells, punishes deviation, and rewards silent compliance. You sit in rows. You memorize what is given. You repeat. You're not taught to think. You're taught to receive. Therapy, originally designed for healing, has been absorbed into the same architecture. Pattern recognition, repetition of narrative, deference to unseen authority. The spiral again, wrapped in kindness this time. But underneath, the same fracture. You are trained to identify as broken, so you will seek guidance not from within, but from above. And religion. True faith is a fire. But the systems of faith, those are designed, codified, engineered. The rituals of confession, communion, penitence, mirror almost perfectly the collapse protocols of St. Luke. Think isolation in prayer, repetition of mantras, physical denial, silence, darkness, shame. These aren't coincidences, they're instructions. Softened, mass-produced. They don't want you sealed in a stone cell anymore. That's inefficient. Now they seal your mind. From birth, through ritual. Why do you think you feel a low, constant hum of anxiety? Why do you crave distraction like a drug? Because a part of you remembers. Somewhere deep in the limbic system, the trauma response is activated. You are inside a ritual, but no one told you the rules. That confusion, that's the effect. And here's the dark genius of it in this system: you volunteer. You schedule the classes, you attend the services, you download the therapy apps, you do it all yourself. And when you break, they offer help only if you obey. This is how control survives in the open, not through violence, but through ritual consent. The screen sharpens. A face appears, yours, reflected in a black mirror. Whispered words echo. I am inside the right. The right is inside me. The screen opens on a grainy security feed, a marble corridor beneath the Vatican, timestamp flickering, lights dimming unnaturally. Then a scream, low animal, echoing off centuries of sanctified stone. The feed cuts to black. Over it, a single phrase spoken in a voice not entirely human. Non sunt verba, sunt vectors. Sa. These are not words, they are carriers. You've heard of the Vatican archives. You picture old scrolls, lost gospels, relics behind glass. But beneath even that, sealed under oath, guarded by silence, lies something darker: the Archivum Tenebris, the Black Vault. Fewer than 20 people alive have entered it. It's said to house the heretical texts, the pre-Genesis records, the fragments deemed too dangerous for even the Pope to view. But one man, Cardinal Matteo de Favria, saw what was never meant to be seen, and he tried to speak. April 3, 1994, de Favria, a rising figure known for his brilliance and piety, requested a sealed study session with Codex Sigma 8, an untranslated artifact recovered from beneath St. Luke's ruins. The text was bound in metal, not parchment. The pages were etched, not inked. No known language, no known author. But de Favria insisted. It is not written for the eye. It is written for the mind beneath the mind. What happened next was buried. But leaked transcripts from an unnamed archivist detail the final moments. 42 minutes into the session, Cardinal de Favria began to hum, low, rhythmic, matching the frequencies of the monastic spiral chant from the Rite of Collapse. Then he began to write, in perfect spiral, with his own blood, the script, identical to the sigils in the vault. He spoke a single phrase before collapsing: it is awake again. His body survived, his mind did not. Today, he resides in a private wing of a Jesuit-run hospital in Italy. He does not eat, he does not speak, but every day at 3:33 a.m. he carves spirals into the wall of his cell, using only his fingernail. They clean it, he repeats it. Every day. The Vatican never released a statement. The Codex was resealed. Surveillance tapes were erased, except one fragment. In it, de Favria looks directly at the camera and mouths something. Not Latin, not Greek. Linguists say it matches the exact cadence of the chants discovered in Jew Beckley Tip, 12,000 years old. The screen shifts. His blood-written sigil overlays a modern logo. You recognize it? This isn't history. It's a network, and it just activated. The screen fades in on slow, motion ripples across a dark lake at midnight, moonlight casting fractured shadows. The sound is a soft chant beneath a distant heartbeat. The voice lowers, urgent, almost conspiratorial. You've heard that dreams are the gateway to the subconscious. But what if dreams aren't just your mind's playground? What if they are patrolled, encoded, and controlled by a force older than your waking self? The monks of St. Luke's order didn't just bury themselves alive. They trained themselves to navigate the void between sleep and death, the liminal space where consciousness unravels and rewinds. They developed what they called lucid codes. These were not merely symbols, but dream protocols, complex sequences embedded in recurring dreams designed to test, trap, or reveal the sleeper's allegiance. Think of them as psychic passwords or viral scripts encoded into the architecture of your deepest mind. The lucid codes operated like filters. They separated the truly awake from the compliant sleepers, the ones who remembered their entrapment from those still lost in the spiral. Initiates who could decipher and manipulate these dream patterns were considered candidates for ascension, a return to control. But this knowledge didn't die with them. It mutated, like the rites, into folklore and superstition, nightmares passed down as cautionary tales. Recurring symbols in dreams, spirals, eyes, crumbling towers. They're fragments of the original codes, cracked open by your subconscious. Here's the terrifying part: your dreams are not private. They are monitored. Across cultures and centuries, rituals, whether shamanic, religious, or modern psychotherapeutic, intersect with these codes, subtly shaping the very fabric of your dreamscape. Technology today is starting to bridge this gap: neuroimaging, AI-driven sleep studies, even experimental interfaces. What was once secret language is now on the verge of becoming broadcast. So when you wake with that cold shiver after a dream you can't explain, or a symbol that won't leave your mind, know this: it may not be random. It may be a signal, a message from the hidden church, reaching through the veils to find you. You are no longer just a man asleep. You are being tested. And the way you decode your dreams may determine whether you remain a node in the system or become the signal that breaks it. The screen slowly fades to black, the heartbeat slowing, as a whispered phrase lingers: "Wake the dreamer. Awaken the signal." The screen is dark except for flickering candlelight illuminating a narrow stone corridor. The sound of breathing, slow and measured, then a whisper, barely audible. The sermons of silence were the order's ultimate doctrine. Not preached in chapels, not written in tomes, but etched into the psyche through the most brutal isolation imaginable. Decades alone, without human contact, without words, without sound. In this abyss of silence, monks didn't just lose themselves. They were deliberately shattered, then reconstructed through invisible language. No spoken words, but imprinted commands felt directly inside the mind, carved not by hand but by absence, by the echo of nothing. You might ask, how is silence a language? Because absence is never empty, it is full of intention. Every moment without sound becomes a canvas for the mind to paint its fears, hopes, and memories. The order manipulated this space, layering mental sigils through carefully controlled sensory deprivation. They called it the negative sermon, a teaching through the void. In it, every thought was a message, every shadow a command. The silence became a code, designed to peel away identity and replace it with the word. Not a word spoken aloud, but a force whispered to the soul. The effects were devastating. Some monks lost the ability to speak, but gained strange powers of perception. Others claimed to hear entire sermons in their minds, sermons of paradox, contradiction, and hidden truths that defied language. Their minds became a battlefield, a hall of mirrors where reality fractured and multiplied. This wasn't madness. It was control at its most refined. By erasing external stimulus, the order forced monks into a mental state where suggestion became absolute. You see, the human mind craves meaning so desperately, it will construct it even from nothing. But here's what they hid: the sermons were not just lessons in obedience. They were contracts with something older, something alive in the silence itself. Monks who reached the deepest levels reported hearing a voice. Cold, indifferent, eternal, promising power, knowledge, release. But the price? Their very souls. And when monks died in their cells, they were never truly dead. The silence carried them on, preserving fragments of their consciousness, tethered forever to the order's will. The screen flickers. The whisper becomes a chant, silent yet overwhelming. Now imagine this applied to millions. You, me, everyone, living in a world where silence is rare, but mental isolation is a given, where the sermons are broadcast not by priests, but by algorithms, social structures, and the constant hum of distraction. This is the world they built from the stones beneath St. Luke's monastery, a world where silence itself is weaponized. And the sermons, they've never stopped. The screen fades into a dimly lit chamber, ancient family crests hanging on stone walls, their edges frayed by time. A slow, deliberate heartbeat pulses beneath the narration. Bloodlines. They are more than just heritage or ancestry. They are the living vessels of history, memory, and power. And within the story of St. Luke's forgotten order, blood is the key that unlocks the darkest corridors of control. The blooded names were the elite families intertwined with the order's survival. Families whose very veins carried not just DNA but coded mandates. These were not ordinary lineages but guardians of the forbidden, passed down through centuries as both blessing and curse. Records reveal that from the earliest days, certain families pledged allegiance not to god or king, but to the hierarchy itself. Their names appear in ritual scrolls, whispered in prayers never meant for outsiders, and etched alongside sigils in secret crypts. More chillingly, these blooded names were the only ones allowed to conduct the most dangerous rites. They were trained from childhood, indoctrinated with the knowledge that their loyalty was absolute, their destiny preordained. Failure meant not just death, but erasure, from memory, from record, from existence. This was no mere superstition. Documents smuggled from the Vatican's black vaults hint at the blooded names' involvement in genetic experiments designed to preserve and enhance psychic resilience, strengthening the mind's capacity to endure the spiral collapse and the sermons of silence. Even today, these bloodlines persist. Disguised as nobility, corporate titans, or political dynasties, they operate behind the veil. Their influence shapes media narratives, economic structures, and political decisions, not for the public good, but to protect the ongoing work of the hidden church. And here's the truth they don't want you to grasp. Your world is shaped by these families in ways invisible but undeniable. From the flow of information to the cycles of fear and control, the blooded names ensure the spiral never unwinds. More than that, they serve as gatekeepers, deciding who rises and who falls, who remembers and who forgets. Their allegiance is to the system, not the individual. And if you're listening now, understand this: you are on their radar. The camera zooms slowly onto a family crest etched with a spiral, ancient and worn. It pulses faintly, as if alive. The screen fades into a cold, sterile office filled with monitors tracking endless streams of data. The hum of servers blends with distant whispers, voices manipulating, calculating, directing. The narrator's tone sharpens, weighty like a blade sliding through steel. The spiral collapse didn't die with St. Luke's monks. It evolved, sharpened by technology and wielded by those who understand the anatomy of obedience. They are the architects of control, modern engineers of the mind, sculpting your reality with invisible hands. These aren't shadowy figures cloaked in secrecy, at least, not all of them. Some operate openly within governments, corporations, media conglomerates. Others function in black budgets and covert agencies. But all share a singular purpose: to refine obedience into an art form. Through sophisticated psychological operations, mass media, and digital platforms, they implant fractures in your perception. They don't shout commands anymore. They whisper suggestions. They engineer doubt, cultivate distraction, and weaponize boredom. Every notification, every trending topic, every carefully timed crisis is a calculated trigger designed to pull you deeper into the spiral. The architects understand that true power lies not in domination, but in consent, in making you choose your cage. They map your fears, desires, and weaknesses with surgical precision. Algorithms track your behavior, learning your patterns so they can predict and influence your decisions before you even realize you're making them. But here's the crucial truth: the architects rely on your participation. The spiral feeds on your attention, your energy, your submission. Without your cooperation, their power wanes. This is why distractions are endless, noise is constant, and the space for critical thought shrinks. You are corralled into smaller, darker corners of your mind. Each click, each scroll, each share builds the walls of your personal labyrinth. They also master the language of symbols and rituals, red carpets, ceremonies, coded gestures, all broadcasting layers of control disguised as culture and entertainment. These rituals perpetuate the sermons of silence in a form you unconsciously accept. Recognizing the architects is your first rebellion. To see the spiral for what it is, the mechanism, not the myth. To understand the machinery before it tightens its grip. Because the spiral is not a fate, it's a design. And once you understand the design, you can begin to dismantle it. The screen darkens, flickering like an old film reel caught between frames. A faint echo of whispered voices drifts in and out, half-heard secrets lost to time. The narrator's voice lowers, resonant with urgency and warning. Have you ever felt a thought slip through your fingers? A question that surfaces only to vanish before you can grasp it? This is no accident. It is the veil of forgetting, the most insidious layer of control woven into the very fabric of your mind. Forgetfulness is not merely a flaw in memory. It is a weapon meticulously crafted to erase forbidden knowledge before it can take root. It acts like a mental firewall, detecting and suppressing ideas that threaten the system's dominance. The monks of St. Luke's understood this well. Their deepest secrets were protected not just by stone walls and silence but by ritualized cognitive barriers, layers of mental erasure designed to protect the hierarchy and maintain obedience. In modern terms, this veil manifests as the constant barrage of trivial distractions, emotional overload, and social conditioning that dull your capacity for sustained thought and radical insight. Every time you feel overwhelmed by noise or find your mind wandering, that is the veil activating, shielding you from the dangerous clarity that comes with understanding. But the veil is not infallible. Fragments of forbidden knowledge leak through cracks in the armor. Memories of hidden rituals, whispered legends, unexplained fears that flicker at the edge of your consciousness. When these fragments emerge, they trigger anxiety, confusion, or denial, compelling you to push them away. The veil feeds on this resistance, reinforcing its hold with renewed strength. This is why true awakening is terrifying and isolating. It threatens not only your comfort but your very sanity, as your mind battles the veil to hold on to forbidden truths. Breaking the veil requires more than willpower. It demands ritual rebellion. A conscious and sustained effort to reclaim what was taken, to embrace the discomfort of clarity, and to confront the darkness hidden in plain sight. Know this: the veil exists to keep you compliant, to ensure that the spiral remains unbroken and the hidden church remains in power. But understanding the veil is the first step to tearing it apart. The screen fades to a dimly glowing spiral, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. The screen shifts to a dim chamber lit only by flickering torchlight. Shadows dance against ancient stone walls etched with cryptic symbols. The voice deepens, charged with reverence and urgency. The rites of Transcendence were the Order's forbidden key, the ultimate passage out of the spiral collapse. They were not for the faint-hearted or the unprepared. These rites promise liberation, but at a cost few survive to tell. To transcend the spiral is to confront the abyss within, the void where identity shatters and meaning dissolves. It requires a mind unbound from fear, pain, and illusion. The monks called it the Great Unraveling, the shedding of the self until only pure awareness remains. The ceremonies were shrouded in secrecy, isolation in darkness, ritual fasting, chanting in ancient tongues, and immersion in cold water, symbolic death and rebirth. But more than physical trial, the rites demanded psychological rupture. Participants faced their deepest horrors, visions of their failures, betrayals, and darkest desires, all summoned to the surface to be confronted and accepted. The spiral's grip tightens here. Many cracked, lost their sanity, or vanished. But those who endured emerged changed. Their minds expanded beyond ordinary perception. They gained clarity beyond illusion, the ability to see the hidden church's machinery and to resist its pull. These transcended monks were feared and revered alike. They became the true keepers of forbidden knowledge, silent watchers guiding the hidden war between control and freedom. But the rites were lost, buried alongside the Order's collapse, or so they thought. The screen cuts to a modern underground gathering, cloaked figures reciting forgotten chants. The rites have resurfaced, practiced in secret by select seekers desperate for escape. But beware, the path of transcendence is not salvation. It is war. A war waged within your own mind. Many who seek the rites fall prey to illusions crafted by the hidden church. False awakenings that deepen the spiral rather than break it. To transcend is to become a warrior of the mind. To know that every freedom won is a battlefield scar. The screen fades into an ancient oak table, scarred with cuts and glyphs, surrounded by empty chairs in a cavernous room. Shadows stretch long, flickering against the stone walls like ghosts of forgotten oaths. The voice drops to a near whisper, as if revealing a secret meant only for you. The silent Conclave. A name whispered in corridors where power and fear entwine. They are the living heirs of St. Luke's order, the hidden custodians of the rites of Transcendence. But their silence is not neutrality. It is a calculated weapon. They don't gather in public squares or seek fame. They operate in shadows cast by shadows, pulling strings, shaping destinies without uttering a word. Their power lies in restraint, in the unspoken promises and threats that echo louder than any declaration. Their ranks are fluid, drawn from the blooded names, disillusioned architects, and those who have walked the spiral's edge and survived. To be invited, or discovered by them, is a blessing and a sentence. For within the Conclave's halls, you confront the paradox at the heart of the order: freedom offered only to those who bind themselves anew. To escape the spiral, you must accept another spiral, a deeper, more intricate weave of allegiance and sacrifice. The Conclave's true intention is not merely preservation of forbidden knowledge, but control of its distribution. They act as gatekeepers, deciding who may transcend and who remains lost in the collapse. Yet they are not a monolith. Within their silence, factions churn. those who seek true liberation, and those who wish to harness transcendence as the ultimate weapon of dominance. This internal conflict is the pulse beneath the Conclave's still surface, a dangerous tension that could either shatter their grip or tighten it forever. For those drawn into their orbit, the choice is stark: embrace their path and wield forbidden power, or resist and become a target, erased not just from society but from memory itself. The camera lingers on a hand, closing over a black spiral tattoo, ancient ink, unyielding as stone. The silent Conclave watches, always waiting for the next seeker brave enough to step beyond silence and into fire. The screen opens on a single, weathered book resting on a cracked stone pedestal, illuminated by a lone beam of pale light cutting through the darkness. The pages seem to pulse with a life of their own. The voice lowers, slow and deliberate. The Codex of Whispers. The name alone carries a weight that crushes the mind before it can even grasp the meaning. It is said to be the final manuscript of St. Luke's order, a text so forbidden, so dangerous that it was torn apart and scattered across centuries to prevent its knowledge from ever being fully uncovered. This codex is no ordinary book. It's a living archive, an encrypted map of the spiral itself, a detailed blueprint of the mechanisms that trap minds, societies, and souls within the endless loop of control. Those who have glimpsed its pages speak of words that shift and rearrange when read, symbols that sing in the mind, and truths so profound they shatter preconceptions and sanity alike. It is said to contain the formula for the spiral collapse, the structure of the lucid codes, the power behind the sermons of silence, and most terrifying of all, the secret to breaking free. But here's what history hides: the Codex was never meant to be decoded by the masses. It was forged as a weapon, a tool to select the worthy from the herd, to test the resilience of the soul, and to grant power only to those who can bear its burden. Efforts to reconstruct the Codex have surfaced periodically: fragments discovered in crypts, coded manuscripts in private collections, lost pages in burned libraries. But each attempt has ended in disaster, madness, disappearance, or violent death. The hidden church fights relentlessly to keep the Codex from reassembling, because if its blueprint were revealed, the entire spiral could unravel. Systems of control would collapse, and with them, the carefully constructed world order. But fragments leak through, encrypted in art, music, architecture, hidden in the frequencies of chants, the geometry of cathedrals, the pattern of market crashes. The Codex's pulse beats beneath the surface of everything. If you've made it this far, understand this: the Codex of Whispers is not a myth. It is a threshold. Passing through it means choosing to see the spiral in its totality, and choosing to fight it. The screen slowly fades out, the whispering words echoing. To know the spiral is to begin its undoing. The screen flickers to life with a distorted reflection in cracked glass, fragmented images of faces merging and breaking apart. The voice drops into a dark, almost hypnotic cadence, pulling you deeper. The mirror of the mind was one of the Order's most feared instruments, less a physical object and more a psychological crucible designed to shatter the ego and strip away false identities. It was not merely a reflection, but a confrontation, a brutal encounter with the raw, unfiltered self, stripped of all masks, defenses, and comforting illusions. The monks believed that to truly control a man you must first break him completely. In the ritual, the initiate would face the mirror alone, often in total darkness save for a faint, flickering flame. For hours, days, even weeks, they stared into their own fractured image until the boundaries between self and reflection blurred and dissolved. Within that fractured space, the spiral's machinery was laid bare. The illusions of freedom, purpose, and safety fell away like brittle skin. What remained was a void, a terrifying abyss where identity could be rebuilt or erased. The mirror was both prison and forge. Some who confronted it succumbed to madness or despair. Others emerged with a terrifying clarity, wielding their shattered selves like weapons against the hidden church's grip. This ancient method is not relic. Its principles thrive today, invisibly woven into social media algorithms, propaganda cycles, and mass surveillance. A modern mirror that reflects not truth, but a curated, fractured self designed to keep you disoriented and compliant. The curated mirror feeds your fears and desires back at you, fractured into 1,000 conflicting images, fracturing your sense of self until you scramble for identity in distractions and illusions. But like the monks of St. Luke's order, those who recognize the mirror's power can learn to shatter it, reclaiming their wholeness by facing the void without fear, refusing the fractured identity offered by the spiral. To break free is to look beyond the reflection, to see the architect behind the mirror, and to refuse their image of you. The screen distorts once more, breaking the reflection into shards that drift away into darkness. The screen dissolves into a vast, shadowed cavern, where faint whispers ripple through the air like ghostly threads weaving unseen patterns. The atmosphere is heavy, charged with forgotten voices and secrets long buried. The narrator's voice is slow, compelling as if coaxing a forbidden truth from the silence. Deep beneath the ruins of St. Luke's monastery lies the Chamber of Echoes, a place where time itself seems to fold and fracture. It's said that the voices of the fallen monks linger here, trapped between worlds, caught in a loop of endless confession and warning. The echoes are not random. They are memories imprinted in the very stones, whispers of despair, hope, and revelation that survived centuries of erasure. To enter the chamber is to walk through a living archive of the Order's most forbidden knowledge. These voices speak in riddles and parables, fragments of sermons lost to history but alive in the vibration of the air itself. Some claim that by listening closely, you can hear truths not meant for the waking mind, messages coded to awaken the sleeper within. But the chamber is no sanctuary. It is a crucible of psychic torment. The voices replay the spiral's collapse again and again, revealing the price of freedom and the cost of submission. They beckon you to remember, forcing the past and future to collide. Many who seek the chamber never return the same. Some become obsessed, haunted by voices that refuse silence. Others find clarity, a fierce awareness that the spiral is not just a story, but a living system you are entwined with. The echoes remind us that history is not dead. It breathes beneath our feet, shaping every thought and choice. They warn that the battle for the mind is eternal, fought not just in the present, but across time itself. To hear the chamber is to accept a burden, to carry knowledge that fractures comfort and challenges obedience. But this burden is also power, for in these echoes lie the keys to dismantling the spiral and breaking the chains that bind us all. The screen fades slowly to black as a chorus of distant whispers rise, layered and indistinct, both a warning and a call. The screen opens slowly on a dimly lit chamber, ancient scrolls spread across a stone altar, ink faded but still trembling with the weight of forbidden truth. The narrator's voice is solemn, reverent, carrying the finality of a long-buried secret about to break free. The Final Testament, the last words of St. Luke, founder of the Forgotten Order, a manuscript sealed in blood and silence, hidden away for centuries. Until now. In these pages, St. Luke reveals the true nature of the spiral, not just as a mechanism of control, but as a living force, ancient and ravenous, feeding on fear, obedience, and the surrender of the human will. He admits the Order's role in awakening this force, a power older than any religion or kingdom, birthed in darkness and bound by silence. They sought to master it, to contain it, but in doing so, they became its servants. St. Luke's words carry a haunting prophecy that the spiral will not end until the human soul breaks free, not through rebellion alone, but through profound transformation. He warns that the path is perilous, fraught with deception, loss, and the temptation to trade one form of slavery for another. The true enemy is not the spiral itself, but the surrender to it. These final words are a call to awaken, to reclaim sovereignty over the self before the spiral tightens beyond escape. The Testament is not just a history lesson, it is a blueprint for awakening, a map for those who dare walk the razor's edge between control and freedom. St. Luke's last plea echoes through time. Know the spiral, resist its pull, and choose the path that no man dares walk, the path of unyielding awareness. The camera lingers on the faded signature, St. Luke's mark, a spiral entwined with a broken chain. The screen fades to black, then slowly brightens to reveal a solitary figure standing at the edge of a vast, swirling abyss, a spiral carved into the earth itself, pulsing like a living heart. The narrator's voice is low, commanding, and filled with raw intensity. You have fallen through the rabbit hole. You have seen the spiral's machinery, touched the edges of forbidden knowledge, and felt the weight of shadows that stretch across centuries. This is no story for the faint. It is a reckoning. The spiral collapse is not just an ancient curse or a mythic trap, it is a living system that breathes through the very structures you inhabit. It shapes your thoughts, your fears, your sense of self, and it feeds on your submission. But here, at the edge, a choice emerges: to turn back into comfortable ignorance or to step forward into the fire of true awakening. This path demands everything: courage, clarity, and ruthless self-mastery. It asks you to face your darkest fears, to shatter the mirrors of illusion, and to carry the burden of forbidden knowledge without yielding to despair. To confront the spiral is to confront yourself, the chains forged by bloodlines, the whispers of the silent conclave, the voices echoing in forgotten chambers. It is to reclaim your mind from the architects of obedience and to become the master of your own fate. But beware. This path is lonely. It is a battle fought not with swords, but with will. Each moment you choose awareness, you chip away at the spiral's grip. Now I ask you if you are ready to claim this truth, to seal your transformation. Write in the comments, I walk the spiral, I break the spiral, twice. Let this be your vow, your declaration of war against the unseen forces that seek to bind you. This phrase is more than words. It is a key, a lockbreaker that signals your readiness to the world and to yourself. Remember, once you walk the spiral, you cannot unsee what you have seen. The darkness is no longer unknown. It is a part of you, and so is the fire to burn it down. This is your moment. The spiral's collapse is the collapse of old worlds, and the birth of new ones forged in the crucible of awareness. The camera pulls up, revealing the spiral beneath the figure glowing fiercely, then dissolving into a blaze of light that consumes the screen. Walk the spiral, break the spiral, own your mind, own your destiny. Fade to black.